Right, and we're ready to roll here. Hi, everybody. I'm Jay Myers. I'm the CEO of Next Generation Manufacturing Canada, NGen. As you know, our mandate is to develop world-leading advanced manufacturing capabilities in Canada for the benefit of Canadians, of course. And I'm really, really pleased today to introduce you to one of our project leads, Dr. Stephanie Willerth. Stephanie, thanks for joining us. So why don't I ask you, first of all, to introduce yourself? You're a professor of biomedical engineering at the University of Victoria, but tell us a little bit more about how you got there.
Oh, for sure. So my background, my undergraduate degrees at MIT were in biology and chemical engineering, and I was always really interested in how to engineer different types of tissue. And the other piece that I've been interested in for even since I was in high school were stem cells. My high school senior thesis was on cloning. I'm going to date myself, but Dolly the sheep was the big news back then, and I was fascinated by the whole idea of being able to reproduce a whole organism. I did my PhD and my postdoc work in biomedical engineering, where I really focused in on doing tissue engineering. And then when I moved up here to the University of Victoria in 2010, my graduate work had mainly focused on engineering neural tissues from mouse stem cells. And then I was really excited to work on that, but using human stem cells. And so the way we would engineer tissues when I was a grad student, and even when I first started my lab, you have your pipettes, and you would pipette your little gels and stem cells into the walls of a 24-hole plate. You'd shake them and you put them in your incubator. And so lots of my graduate work and the first few years, we're making all these tissues manually, analyzing them, and so forth. And then around 2015, 2016, Tamer Mohammed, who is the CEO at Aspect, they had started their bioprinting company. And so they reached out to my group because they were very good on the mechanical. They're actually out of Conrad Wallace's group at UBC. So electrical, mechanical, very good at making the platforms for 3D printing, but didn't know as much about the materials and how to keep cells alive and functioning. And so we started to work with them on making bioink projects. My lab was really excited because instead of having to manually make these things all by hand, you could actually extrude them. And when it works properly, you can make hundreds of tissues in a day, really making the process high throughput. And then we ended up spinning off a company just based on our expertise in bioinks, and that's Axolotl Biosciences. So we essentially make bioinks that are really good at printing human tissues that actually function like human tissues.
And that kind of brings us to the project that we're co-investing in with you and Starfish Medical, which is, I think, one of the most interesting cutting-edge applications of advanced manufacturing that I've come across, which is basically, and tell me if I got this wrong, but the way I think of it is 3D printing brain tissue here, and that's I know a real simplification here. But you founded this company, Axolotl, and now we're working with Starfish on this really interesting project. So tell us. Well, let's start first of all, not so much with the technology, but why brain ink? Why try to 3D print brain tissue? And why is it even possible?
Well, so lots of reasons to 3D print brain tissue. One thing, so one of the areas more on our research side, there's still a lot that's not known about the brain. And even for things, one of the diseases that we study a lot, and probably everyone has had family members affected by it, is Alzheimer's. And so one of the things is, if you study this, like, the animal models aren't very accurate because in general, mice don't get Alzheimer's. So being able to model that using the stem cells we do, so we actually take cells from a patient suffering from Alzheimer's, we reprogram them back into being stem cells, and then we can culture these brain tissues that exhibit some of the same hallmarks and you'd see in a patient. Obviously, when people are still alive and suffering from Alzheimer's, you can't go in and look at their brain tissue, but this is a way to actually reproduce it outside the body and look at it. You can also test drugs on it, and you can do a lot of different interventions on it that you can't do, just due to the general inaccessibility of brain tissue. So that's one of the reasons we got into that, is just For diseases like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, as people know who have loved ones who suffer from them, there aren't really good cures. You'll treat the symptoms, but there's not really a long-term solution. So partially, you can use these models to understand more about the biology mechanism, which I know for Alzheimer's is controversial. And in our work with Håkan Nygaard's group over at UBC, he's a practicing doctor who also has a PhD and runs a lab. You really see a lot of variability between patients. And so I think being able to print these personalized models will really provide a lot of insight. So that's kind of the motivation for why to study the brain tissues.
Well, and I think when most people think about 3D printing, they're thinking about plastics or metals, maybe not so much human tissue. How, if you're working on the biomedical side here and bioengineering, what sort of considerations do you have to, are in place here as you're working with those types of materials and with additive applications?
Yeah. So as I said, some of the things that, it's a lot more difficult to process and print the polymers. You need to keep your cells alive, and not just alive, but a lot of them alive. And then also to get the same kind of functions you'd see in the human brain or heart, for example. So we're a bit more limited in terms of the structures you can print when you're using these materials that are really good at keeping cells alive, just due to the fact they tend to be softer and harder to manipulate than some of the plastics. So ours, it's actually a chemical reaction. So you actually have multiple channels. So then they have to mix for our ink to solidify. And it takes a lot of work to time it to make sure you can get it to solidify as you extrude. And as I said, a lot of the bioprinters, and I'm friends with lots of people who've made some really interesting bioprinter technology, are usually coming from a mechatronic electronic background. So you don't necessarily have, that's what's inherently cool about it, but also makes it really challenging is not only do you have, like, once you get your, stages working and things like that, then how are you going to keep your cells alive? And what our group, my research group does, and also I know other groups, if you actually really want to get tissues that are physiologically relevant, you need to have a lot of cells. So we print at 1 million cells per mil, because that's similar to if you were to look at your own skin, that's similar to the density of cells you'd have there. But it's expensive and it takes a lot of time and effort to get that many cells. So those are some of the big challenges. And since we are on a manufacturing podcast, I will say that there is a lot of wonderful companies out there working on that issue to make bioreactors to scale up that process of how do you expand your population of cells to get, the millions, and even for some of the cellular therapies, the billions of cells you need to do this kind of printing, but also for therapeutic applications.
Right. So, and I guess that leads into my next question. That a lot of this sounds very research oriented, but you're looking at scaling this up to actual, commercialization stage and full scale manufacturing stage. And tell us a little bit about what you and Starfish have been doing in that area.
Yeah. So just to briefly touch on for any of the academics out there, one of the things that's actually been really interesting now that we have the company is, when you do research, and obviously I love a PhD, have a lab, you just do it till it works. And then if it works enough times and you get your statistics, you're great, you publish it. And there's so many things in labs that you're like, we did this protocol till it worked. We found that it worked reproducibly. With the company, just even on our base ink, when we started the company, then you really had to drive down cost. And to be honest, we probably should have done this a decade ago, considering how much money we've saved in just driving down the cost now that we have the company, and just kind of the level of rigor and SOPs that go into that, just considering that this is one of the base materials we've all worked with. On the Starfish side, so we have a base ink that's really good at printing a wide variety of tissues. We call it tissue print. It's for sale. Where our patent pending technology comes in is that we have inks that have these small drug releasing particles called microspheres, and that's what our patent is around, these bioinks with microspheres in them. And the reason you'd want an ink with microspheres in it, for example, brain print, is that these drug releasing particles tell your stem cell to become brain tissue. So it's easier to use. And again, we're targeting academics, and actually our big target audience is biologists who tend to want to have something they can buy off the shelf, and then they'll know it will work to consistently print brain tissue. They don't want to be messing around and doing all their experiments to find that out. So for these drug releasing particles, we in lab, again, we currently make them kind of like you make a salad dressing. You make an emulsion, and then you get the small particles, you dry them. And again, for lab, that's great. Ruchi did her thesis on it. That's how Laura, my co-founder, did her thesis. But now that we actually have a company, we want to make those particles more reproducible. so that's why we've partnered with Starfish, who have a lot of experience in microfluidics. And again, being in my office, this is actually one of Aspect's microfluidic heads. But these are the kind of devices we're using to now make our microspheres. But again, as Starfish will tell you, and this is what their expertise is in, you can see this is made from a plastic device. You can run them for a couple hours and then they wear out. So Starfish is making a commercial grade version of this that you can actually run for days. To instead of producing, micrograms of microspheres would get grams. And so you're actually in commercial scale. And then we're also incorporating some imaging software in to ensure that we have quality control. Because again, if you're selling a product and you're upscaling your manufacturer, you want to have your QC metrics. And it's just a way to sort of take the technology out of lab and then scale it up for commercial grade production. And so we're really happy to partner with them. And they do have a lot of expertise at their Toronto office in microfluidics.
No, it sounds great. I think that the Victoria area is really a key center. It's just such an innovative center for these technologies, for other medical technologies as well. But Axolotl's been recognized recently, lots of recognition and acknowledgement about what you've been able to achieve. Tell us a little bit about that, because that must be pretty exciting.
Yeah, we just got back from Germany. So we were recognized by the Falling Walls Conference. It's a really large international conference looking at, there's 20, they chose the top 25 academic spinoffs in the world. And so they're all focused on technologies that could potentially help humanity. So there's a whole session on some really interesting, I'd actually check for both Jayson and anyone watching the live stream. I definitely suggest checking out all the companies. They're amazing. So there's a lot of really awesome clean tech companies, including a few out of Australia that are looking at innovative ways of making fertilizer, cutting down on waste. There's the air company out of the United States that's using carbon dioxide capture to make clean vodka, clean perfume, and eventually clean jet fuel. And then I was in the health session, which again had so many cool companies from all over Europe and the world with different technologies, and we were excited to be able to showcase our bioink technology. It was a really good platform to get a lot of exposure and to just meet a lot of other interesting people and potential investors. And also, they have, for any graduate students out there, we actually, I think 2 Canadian grad students went as part of the Falling Walls lab. So they do grad students from all over the world who can come and present their work. And actually, Science is a Drag, which is an outreach program out of Toronto, they took one of the top awards for being one of the top science communicators in the world. So I was cheering on Canada from the front row with this.
That's great. And you're talking about graduate students, but just young people generally, and kids in public school, high school. A lot of the work that we've done to excite them about some of the work in advanced manufacturing. We've learned, number one, they want to make a huge difference. But the other thing we've learned is that everybody is excited about 3D printing human tissues for some reason. So what's your advice for anybody who's watching as a young person who might want to get into the field?
So yeah, we can probably blame Westworld. Although I'm always like, with Westworld, I'm always like, that is not how you will. Like, yeah, my brother-in-law was. We were talking about this at family Thanksgiving a few years back, and I was like, that's not how you 3D print a horse. Westworld is wrong. They don't even use cells. For young people, I would suggest definitely trying to take as much math and physics as possible. I know for women in Canada, that's been one of the issues, is if you don't get in the right physics or math sequence, and it's really hard to get into engineering like directly out of high school. I also would suggest checking out some of the resources, like 3D Heals is an international organization that does a lot of really cool work, and they do a lot of really cool webinars. And I know that a lot of the 3D printing companies have a lot of excited content that they put out. I think we're a pretty collaborative field. So there's a lot of stuff out there. And also I'd say, check out social media. A lot of people are really active on that. And for bioprinting, I think biology is good. I also would suggest just buy a 3D printer. Like, we have an Ender on our kitchen table, which seems very stereotypical, but my husband's also an engineer, so it kind of goes with the territory. There are some really interesting open access papers out there where you can modify, your traditional $300 Ender to be a bioprinter, and actually you can bioprint some of the parts, still make it a bioprinter. So I would definitely go look at that. There's a lot of open access literature. In fact, a lot of our papers on our inks are open access, so anyone can read them. So I think that those are some really good resources. And if you can't afford a 3D printer, a lot of cities have maker spaces. So I would suggest getting involved with those as well. But yeah, it's interesting because the company, as you know, our forward-facing products are the bioinks and things like that. But we have done some consulting with regular 3D printing. And actually, during the pandemic, I organized a big group out here that we did a lot of 3D printing for face shields as well, and it was a huge community effort. So I think it's one of the nice things about 3D printing is like it is pretty accessible. I mean, for some of the low-end printers, obviously they're the expensive bioprinters that you need to get permission to tour. And also for people, and I check out, I don't know if they're national, but like Science Venture. So we have a lot of science outreach here on campus. If you're near a university, I know a lot of schools, we do an engineering showcase day. So you can go see what's going on at your local schools.
Well, I don't even want to ask about whether you and your husband are 3D printing dinner or not, but let me ask about, as a business, are you finding it difficult to attract talent, or is this, that all of the capabilities that you've been speaking about and the opportunities for young people and others interested in connecting with you, has that been a talent pipeline that you've been able to draw on so far?
Yeah, but it's kind of cheating for me because I used to direct our biomedical engineering program, and we do have a 3D bioprinting class at UVic. So our team right now, we have 8 staff, and I think 7 of them are recent UVic grads. And then Selena actually graduated from Fleming College back east, and then she's working for us, and then she's going to be attending UVic come spring. But there's been a ton of interest online, and for anybody watching, definitely check us out. Anna, who's currently working at Axolotl and doing her master's here at UVic. She does all of our social media. So we have a really nice Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn. And I think we have a TikTok, although I have no idea how to access that. So for all the high school kids watching, you can find us on TikTok and check out our videos.
Yeah, me too. I'm not really a TikTok addict, although we use it a lot. And look, my sister's a biotechnologist, and I know she's watching, so you might get an application from her as well here. One more question, and it's very self-serving around NGen. What's your advice? As I said, your project is really an amazing project that's right in our wheelhouse in terms of looking at world-leading new solutions, unique solutions in the field of advanced manufacturing. What's your advice for other companies that might be looking at developing an NGen project?
Oh, I highly recommend it. And this is not a paid anything, but it's been great working with you guys. They send you part of the project money up front, which as a startup is always very much appreciated. I found the reporting's pretty simple, and it's been pretty straightforward. For us, it's been great because it's given us an opportunity to work with Starfish in official capacity. And also, I think it's given us a lot of visibility as well. But it's been one of, in terms of like the whole, the application process was good, and like we got a lot of feedback. We worked a lot with Stephanie Willerth, who's amazing. Contracting took a little bit longer, but I know that's because you guys were having some personnel issues. But once it all went through, like everything's been really smooth with the project and the milestones, and it's been really great working with Stephanie to make sure you have these defined project milestones, and it's helpful in keeping us on track and that. And so I definitely have actually recommended people, and in fact, yesterday I was at the Victoria Rising Economy Conference, and I was telling some of my friends who own local machine shops, because they're collaborating. I'm like, oh, you guys should do this as an NGen project, because it's a really good funding mechanism, especially to build our manufacturing capacity here, which is something on island we're trying to build. And I know we've talked a little bit about some of the future projects we might do as Victoria is trying to expand its manufacturing in general. But we've been really happy with you guys in the program.
No, it's great. We appreciate it, and although that's not a paid announcement, it was pretty good, and I hope to buy a glass of wine sometime next time in Victoria for that.
Oh, for sure. And you do know, I am a part owner of Macaloni Caledonian whiskey distillery out here. So if you do visit,
oh, excellent.
for all the chemical engineers in the audience, we have very nice whiskey stills. So.
Absolutely. You'll get a whole bunch of people coming out to Victoria now. but that's great. And it certainly shows how diverse advanced manufacturing can be. Well, but a nice, I gotta say, a nice connection between printing brain tissue and whiskey distilling, because you could probably replace a lot of the brain tissue that as a result of the whiskey out there too.
Yeah.
But tell us one more question, which is, what does the future hold for Axolotl and what you want to do going forward?
So I was really excited because this past summer, a company called 3D Therapeutics spun out of Cornell, so they're in New York. They actually took a patient's own stem cells and their bioink, and so these patients had one ear that was deformed. So they scanned the healthy ear and they printed the structure of the healthy ear in mirror image to fix these ear deformities. And so we were really excited, and by we, I mean me and other people in the field, because we actually got bioprinted tissues into humans, which I thought was going to take a bit longer. And I had my money on skin, because skin is very easy and direct to print on and very simple. As my lab says, they're like, if we could just print skin, it prints so easily and beautiful. And we do print skin. It's just a lot easier than our neural work. So yeah, I'm pretty excited that we're actually getting these tissue therapeutics into people, because I think it's going to pave the way for more complex things like what my friends at Aspect are doing. I think they just presented some really exciting liver data, and then they have some interesting work with pancreas for diabetes. For us, I think the thing that we're really excited about is the clinical collaborations we have, being able to print brain tissue from these patients with Alzheimer's. And now that we've got the models developed, we can do some drug screening. And I'm really excited about the patient project, just because if we can reverse some of these Alzheimer's symptoms in a dish, Hakon can prescribe that drug back to his patients. Long term, we are working with Health Canada, and actually we've been in talks with Jayson Labs in the United States. So Jayson Labs sells all the animal models of disease. So they make a lot of money doing that. And I think most people are probably familiar with the way you normally get a drug in the clinic is you do it in animals. If it looks good there, then you can do it in people. But it has a really high failure rate because animals are not people. So we're hoping to work with them to do some things where we will do a human tissue model of like the Alzheimer's mutation that they have in mouse, and then see how the drugs react in the different systems, with the idea eventually of getting a human tissue model that would be as part of the regulatory process, and possibly instead of using an animal model. And so there's been a lot of momentum for that, both in Canada, I always say before the world ended, like 2 weeks before we shut everything down in March, we had a meeting with Health Canada about how to define the sandbox. And then 2 weeks later, everything went up. But both there in the US, there's movements away. And I mean, we use animal models because that's the best thing we have right now. But I think some of these human tissue models, and even I think we've talked about this, like the new hospital they're building in Vancouver, they're going to have a 3D printing suite with a bioprinting section. And so I really think you'll see it as a standard feature where people will go in, they'll biopsy your tumor, or they'll biopsy your blood, and they'll make stem cells, and they'll really start to see, is this drug going to work for this patient? And that's why I think it's really exciting and really powerful for being able to transform sort of how we'll treat patients.
No, it's really amazing work, and you're making such an impact for the healthcare, not only Canadians but right around the world. So congratulations on what you've done, and just really looking forward to what the future holds for you and the company going forward.
Oh yeah, thanks so much. Yeah, and I mean it's one of the things that's been really exciting about the company is we do like we're in talks with distributors in Japan, Korea, India, and so we really do have even though we're in Victoria, we have an internationally competitive product, which is why we're recognized by people like Falling Walls. And so I think it's really exciting in that sense that we are global, and we are helping people all over the world.
No, that's super. Thanks very much, Stephanie. Good luck to you.
All right, awesome. Well, thanks again for having me on.
Okay, no, thank you. Bye for now.
Bye.